Welcome back to Weekend Express. Now, the political party nomination season prior to the election is fast approaching. IEBC has set April 13th to 26th as the nomination period. And the major political parties, Jubilee and the opposition NASA, have assured Kenyans that the party primaries will be free and fair. And in the case of the opposition outfit NASA, they have also assured the Kenyans that should that standard flag bearer be chosen, that they will not disintegrate and will remain united. But how likely is this ahead of the party primaries? Here to discuss this in more detail, Advocate Nelson Harvey. Many thanks for joining us in studio. We'll also be expecting ODM's Judy Pareno later on in studio to discuss this in a bit more detail. Nelson, many thanks for joining us on Weekend Express. Thank you. Right, so let's begin with that promise that political parties are giving Kenyans of free and fair party nominations. Given the history of party nominations in Kenya, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe the outcome of the nominations will be free and fair, despite the problems that may have prevailed much earlier in the past. I think the election law has been streamlined to ensure that parties comply with the nomination rules. And with that in place, it is most expected that there will be free and fair nominations.
Right, yes. Right. So, I mean, there's been a lot of disgruntled aspirants and even, sitting or, current politicians who've been crying foul that their nominations may not be free and fair. Case in point, just yesterday and this whole past week, we've seen Nairobi Senator Mike Sonko really complain about the fact that there may be attempts to lock specific people out of the nominations. But that being said, after the close of the nominations, there's a lot of legal loopholes that Kenyans still don't understand. What happens then?
The starting point in an election process is, of course, the nomination. And depending on the magnitude of strength of a particular party, whoever gets that nomination certificate is, so to speak, home and dry.
Right.
So, for instance, if you look at the side of Jubilee, whoever gets a nomination on the part of, let's say, the gubernatorial election for Nairobi has a very great chance of success. So it is a do and die situation. But if you look at it from the avenues of complaints that have come across, it's quite apparent that there is a lot of acrimony, especially on the part of Jubilee, bearing in mind that the parties that form this coalition have now been folded up. And it's either you get the Jubilee nomination or you're not in the race. Compare this, let's say, with NASA, where, so to speak, it's quite apparent that save for the presidential election candidate, it's most likely that the member parties of the NASA alliance will field individual candidates for these seats. So if you look at it from that point of view, then you may come to appreciate Sonko's anxiety. And I think it's a real anxiety. If you pair him with the other candidates that stand against him, it's most likely that he may not have, so to speak, a fair chance. Yes.
Now, of course, this is a headache for political parties across the divide. But let's focus a bit more on the opposition outfit, NASA, because they, in a catch-22 situation, they're trying to select a flag bearer. And it's become apparent now that this August 8th election is going to be the measure of democracy in the country. So stuffing a leader down the throat of the electorate is really something that will not be acceptable. And it cannot be taken for granted also that NASA will remain united if the process of selecting that flag bearer is not free and fair. Which brings us to the next question. What would constitute a free and fair criteria of selecting a flag bearer that would guarantee that NASA still remains united afterwards?
Well, I think the members of NASA, the ones who, so to speak, are the ones whose names are before the selection panel, have made it quite clear that they will strive to remain united irrespective of the outcome that will be delivered as to the flag bearer. But I think what is most important to the voting population within the NASA bloc is to ensure that they get into power. It doesn't matter who is in power, but the entire alliance has to be in power. And for that reason, what may inform the minds of the selection panel and the individuals whose names are before the selection panel is to understand that it is no longer time for them to talk about, I ceded my rights to you, I sacrificed for you the other time. I think
and we've seen a lot of that already.
Yes, yeah, it's empty rhetoric because all of them have sacrificed. It's now a high time that they again sacrifice, not for each other, but for the entire cause. And if that is not attained, then for a fact, I think the voting population within the NASA bloc will feel they have been shortchanged. Right,
because let's take a look at what's been on the headlines and what's been highlighted by the media even this morning on the Standard. I believe we have Orengo saying that Raila Odinga, ODM's Raila Odinga will be the flag bearer. Just this week, we also had Kalonzo Musyoka, who presented his certificate. And I'm sure the other two presidential hopefuls are also going to be doing the same thing. And we're seeing this fight for supremacy, so to speak, among the four contenders.
The fight for supremacy amongst the four contenders maybe out of anxiety. I think the selection panel is taking a rather long period of time. But anyway, I think it's a good fight. It's one that will excite the population. It's one that will inform the electorate. And I don't think they can be blamed for taking their respective views. For instance, Wiper is well entitled to claim that Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka will be their flag bearer. So to speak, even ODM is so entitled to say so, NC so. But the final analysis is what is in contest here is the NASA ticket. And it needs not be understood who are the invitees in the NASA house. I think it's called that they are the visitors in the NASA house. So let them make their request, but I think at the end of the day, the selection panel will have to come up with a suitable individual. But this is a healthy debate because whereas the nominations for the other seats below the president may appear to excite and invite a lot of participation, I think for the presidential candidate, the excitement must be reduced within those four. And I think it's a healthy excitement.
Right, right. And also let's not forget that the nomination process is the beginning of the main event,
yes.
the actual general election. And therefore, whether it's free and fair, that begins from the nomination process. But across the divide, we have had aspirants and sitting politicians complain that there are areas where direct nominations are being given out, either because it is being said that the particular aspirants in those regions do not have any competition. But the very fact that direct nominations are being given, is that a benchmark of free and fair nominations?
Well, multi-party politics comes with its disadvantages. And it cannot be overemphasized that multi-party politics must always be influenced by a particular political party. So, for instance, if a party is of the view that a candidate, though popularly selected as one to be fronted to the electorate, may not pose a great challenge to the opponent, a party may want to decide using internal party mechanisms to ensure that the most preferred candidate, preference being with high chance of success. And I think this is a reality. You may just take, for instance, several key contested areas. For instance, the seat of governor for Nairobi, the seat of governor for Mombasa, and the seat of governor for Kakamega. And I think these three stand out as the most elaborate examples of what must happen. So let's start with Mombasa. For instance, I think Governor Hassan Joe has the benefit of fast arrival. So it is most likely that even within the NASA coalition, whereas they may have three candidates to deal with for this seat, it will be very preferable that they either hold joint nominations, or if those joint nominations do not succeed, then they look for a way in which they may convince the other aspirants to vote and agree that they have a single candidate. Same to Nairobi, although Nairobi, it looks like it's just a contest between whoever Jubilee will front and Kidero. And then another area that the opposition may have a big issue to deal with will be a county like Kakamega. We have the incumbent Governor Oparanya. We have his main challenger, Senator Boni Khalwale, and more recently we have seen a very new face into the race, lawyer Michael Osundwa. And these three individuals represent the key parties within the NASA alliance. It will be very difficult for CORD, so to speak, for ODM, to want to cede ground other than in favor of Oparanya. And same for Boni Khalwale. But Kakamega being a county that is predominantly Luhya, then you can actually see the marketability of a Luhya candidate, the marketability of a candidate that has his origin from a predominantly Luhya-supported party like ANC, may have a better chance of winning the election. But again, those are very serious issues that the members of this alliance need to take into consideration.
And that being said, even before we move on, we're speaking so much along not just the tyranny of numbers, really, but it's so very obvious that the ethnic issue that comes into this criterion, the strategy of picking candidates from the specific regions, is one that we seemingly cannot move away from. NASA has said that they are the option, the alternative for those that is disgruntled by the Jubilee administration. But the manner in which they're strategizing their entry into power seems very similar to what Jubilee is doing.
Well, I think there can be no doubt it's very similar, and it's very much within explanation. I think Jubilee on their part are very confident of a resurrection after the 8th of August. And I think NASA on their part are also very confident of being born again on the 8th of August. And the script is the same. They must read from the same book. They must apply the same tactics. And I think over and above that, it becomes a game of chance with the electorate being given the opportunity of deciding who between these two will have the life after 8th of August.
Now, of course, many have said that the elections will be won or lost at the nominations stage. Let's talk party fallout after the nominations. There's a lot of parties also waiting to benefit from the fallout, many of them leaving their doors open for the disgruntled members. But how is this likely to play out, especially within the opposition again? Because for Jubilee, right now there seems to be, they have the incumbent, as President Uhuru Kenyatta. But how is this likely to play out, especially in terms of the 4 core principles within NASA?
Well, the manner in which the election law has now been amended seems to suggest that there will be very little room for ambulation after individual parties submit their list of members, because it's supposed to coincide within a very short period of time with the deadline for also submission of the nominated candidates. Now, much earlier in previous elections, we used to see people subjecting themselves to nominations within a party framework that had a higher chance of success, but already holding a certificate elsewhere, just in case theirs should change. I do not think that will prevail.
Literally 1 foot out the door.
Yes, that may not be the way to go this time, because the party list membership and the requirements as to the deadline of submission of the nominated candidates may lock out the opportunity of a prospective candidate holding 2 certificates, with the hope that if he doesn't get the most preferred certificate, then he will go back to the drawer and pick out the alternative certificate.
Right, yes. All right. And let's focus more, at least, on the fact, on the issue of direct nominations being given out, because we're talking of the likes, like you mentioned earlier, Wycliffe Oparanya, the likes of James Ongwae. These are among the several ODM legislators who've already clinched the party ticket without undergoing nominations, so to speak. And now there's that headache within NASA that they may be having joint nominations, they may not be having joint nominations. In terms of fielding candidates for the different positions, is this likely to cause a clash among the affiliate parties?
I don't think it's likely to cause a clash, because I think from the initial threshold, the affiliate members of NASA have indicated that, save for the presidential flag bearer and the areas that are considered battlegrounds, and the areas that are considered battlegrounds are very few. They can actually be named. There could be less than 5. They will allow party members to undertake their individual nominations, with a result that will have on the ballot more than one individual, but still under the flagship of NASA. Yeah.
All right. Now, when we began, you said you're rather sure that the outcome of the nominations will be free and fair across the board. And this is something that hasn't really been recorded in history. Why would you say that they will be free and fair?
Now, for once, I think parties have understood the need to comply with the rules and the legal requirements as regards elections, because the consequences could be very catastrophic. Much as the law now allows both the IBC and the individual parties to ensure the resolution of disputes in respect to nominations, we have seen in the recent past these issues eventually being taken to the court. And if you remember, in 2013, there was a lot of litigation, not only within the rank of IBC, but even in the High Court, where the court could point out the areas of defect and direct that a particular candidate, who, in the view of the court, was the most meritorious, bearing in mind the procedure undertaken, should have been given the nomination, and directed that be given the nomination. And I do not think the parties may want to cross the line on the judicial prudence vis-a-vis the political expediency of giving a direct nomination or manipulating the entire nomination process.
Right. And then, of course, there's been the issue of IEBC and whether it should intervene with regard to party nominations. It's just 5 months to the August 8th general election. The IEBC commissioners just came into office not very long ago, and political parties now still in that back and forth as to whether IEBC should really be conducting the party nominations. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think my thoughts represent a bigger, widely informed legal thought. IBC is least prepared for this election. Now, without deficiency in preparation, it cannot be explained how IBC can confidently say that it can help the parties in undertaking these party nominations. There's actually no time. Over and above that, it doesn't have the goodwill of most of these parties to undertake the nomination. Save, of course, for those who have clearly indicated they are comfortable with IBC doing the nomination for them. Jubilee has said we are comfortable with this being undertaken. But it also needs to be understood. Jubilee seems to have the benefit of fast arrival. It has a more elaborate national-wide party structure that can easily fit into the framework of IBC supervision. Now, the anxiety on the part of the opposition, and I think that will be a good anxiety, I don't think they have any trust in IBC doing this work for them.
And isn't that very telling? If we cannot trust IBC to carry out party nominations, how are we going to trust IBC to then oversee the general election?
I think there's no alternative. IBC is the only one that can oversee the election. And you can say in the last... let's say in the last few months, there's been a lot of acrimony expressed on how much prepared IBC is. And I mean, if you to ask for my own personal opinion, I don't think IBC can conduct this election within this short period of time and give an accurate and credible result. But the legal framework does not allow for a postponement. Neither does it allow for an alternative. So all the contestants, all the beneficiaries of this process must do with IBC. All
right, and that being said, of course, time is the bigger issue and the preparedness in terms of IBC, but should they actually intervene in the party nominations, what is the legal implication of that, especially after disgruntlement or disgruntled members come out after the nominations to claim it wasn't free and fair?
Strictly from a legalistic point of view, IBC does not have the mandate to undertake the nominations. And in the election petition that followed immediately after 2007, the main grievance by most of the successful petitioners were that IBC had participated in the manipulation of the election process way before even the election began through undertaking the nomination for some of the parties. And if that background is taken into consideration, there is a bigger explanation as to why, in my respectable view, IEBC must leave this issue to the parties to undertake the nomination, because it must also be taken into consideration where the nominations within parties result into a dispute. Then IEBC is supposed to be the arbiter in the dispute resolution. How will IEBC be the arbiter? It has already participated in the process. It doesn't make judicial sense. All right.
So let's move away from party nominations for a moment and just delve more in this IEBC issue, because the elections are fast approaching. And IEBC plays a very instrumental role in those elections. And it's clear that the Commission hasn't really come out and told Kenyans where it stands in terms of preparedness, in terms of its capacity to really oversee these elections. And if we really cannot trust them to oversee the nominations, then where are we in terms of preparedness? And what does this mean for the stability of the country?
I think the lack of preparedness is more on the part of the personnel as opposed to the structure, because the electoral supervision mechanism has been in Kenya for a long period of time. Now, the issue is the personnel, and it must be taken into consideration that the current commissioners of the IEBC haven't had sufficient time to acquaint themselves on how this election is supposed to be undertaken. And rather than take effort ensuring that they're well prepared, all they come out to say to the public is that there's nothing wrong, everything is in order, we're very much prepared. And then all of a sudden they tell you, oh no, I think the procurement of this process has been interfered by the opposition, has been interfered by the court, it has been hacked. I mean, what else do you need to be told to understand that this is a commission that is least prepared for this exercise?
Right. And of course, there's been claims very politically that IEBC could have been compromised by the executive, and this is why the opposition especially is coming out to say we need an audit of the voter register, we need IEBC to come out and tell Kenyans whether it will carry out free and fair nominations. But the very fact that it's also being entangled in these political propaganda, so to speak, what does that say about its credibility?
Well, I think the IEBC has a lot to do. It has a lot of work to ensure that its credibility is sanitized. And I think those complaints that must have been received from the opposition are with a lot of merit, because the starting point is that IEBC, to the eyes of many, is part of government, and rightfully so, because this is a commission that is established within the Constitution and therefore within the framework of government. The entire mechanism of operation, the entire budget is provided by the government. And if the government, so to speak, is a creation of a political activity, then one of the participants in the process is legitimately justified in laying a claim as to the credibility of the referee. Yes.
So there's no question as to the word that independent before the word IEBC, independent. But just before we continue, let's take a caller from Busia. Shaful from Busia, good morning. To your comment or question.
Good morning, madam.
Go ahead.
I quite agree with the panelist who is in studio that IEBC should not engage themselves in party nomination, because the time they are having is too short. If they engage in party nominations right now, I think they will have to go. They will have to have a work which is more of what they expected, and already they have said that the work they are, the pending work is a lot. So I think it should be parties should nominate their own people instead of engaging IEBC.
All right.
And okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Shaful.
And again, some of the political parties have got, they question the credibility of IEBC. So I think it will open a window of those who have been drawn from the nominations to allege that the IBC was not free and fair. And that might be a contributory factor when it comes to general election. And we'll have to say that the IBC held election which was not free and fair. It will give an hand. The other criticizers to say that the IBC was not worth holding nominations. And to be precise, let the IBC engage as an independent body to participate in general elect activities rather than engaging again in party nominations.
All right.
I think that is my point.
All right, thank you very much, Fulda, calling in from Busia. Many thanks for your call. And he brings in, an interesting point in terms of credibility and parties that don't really trust IBC to do this. But let's also combine this with the fact that just this week we had IBC's Wafula Chebukati and the CEO Ezra Chiloba come out and assure Kenyans, or express their fears rather, that the Commission may not be able to meet its deadlines as set out by the law, especially when it comes to the procurement of ballot papers. This is just 5 months to the election.
Well, I don't think Chebukati and Ezra Chiloba can come before the nation and tell us that the IBC may not be able to do it. They just have to do it. They have no alternative. And as I've indicated before, they have had sufficient time. And for this reason, I'm not talking about the two of them as an individual. We're talking about the Commission as an institution. And the fact that one of them could have come in much later is really not an explanation. And I do not think this is an argument that will sail through either to the voting population. It's not an argument that can also sail through before a judicial inquiry. And these issues have been examined by the review board in respect of the procurement. They've also been examined by the court. And the courts and the board have insisted that the IBC have an obligation to ensure that Kenyans have elections within the time frame set out in the Constitution and within the integrity status decreed by the Constitution. They must be accurate. They must be verifiable. And if they don't have ballot boxes for now, I think they better give Kenyans an explanation. Did they want there to be an election? Or did they want an election to be conducted in the manner
because the initial tender was cancelled, and IBC had initially expressed a lot of opposition to that. But before, let's take another caller. We understand we have Wilson also calling in. Wilson, good morning. What's your question or comment?
Good morning, madam.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm calling from Wasindishu. I'd like to give Nauye Mugeme Nukonaye katika studio that because the IBC in a draw its funds from the government, may likely is a compromise. That's not true. After some attack to ODM in a draw funds from the exchequer, does it mean that also ODM may never compromise by the government? True, madam. Mimi ningeuliza radio station ya KTN kwamba whenever they have a debate like that one, they should have pia kutoka katika vyama vingine. We should not be having a biased guys like those, the one in studio. Tunataka a balanced debate so that we can make a proper decision. But inviting every now and then we are having somebody from ODM NASA, every now and then ODM NASA. You should be inviting also other guys. Thank you.
All right, many thanks, Wilson, there from Uasin Gishu County. And just a reminder there that we had expected ODM's Judy Pereno of the ODM Election Board to be here to discuss this in a bit more detail, but he has unfortunately not been able to be here today. So, Nelson, just as we wind up, with regard to party nominations, 13th to 26th April, what are Kenyans really in for in terms of political realignments, especially after those nominations?
Well, those candidates who may really have a higher chance of success may, within this limited period of time, want to align themselves with the winning parties. Because as I've indicated much earlier, the submission of the list of members at the deadline of nomination, so to speak, is the cut-off point. I think thereafter there'll be, so to speak, many massacres of political careers, and there will be a lot of activity in the intervening period.
All right, yes. And as we have a final caller, Elisha, also calling in. Good morning, Elisha. Your comment or question? All right, seems to be a very noisy place. And that brings us to a close here on Weekend Express. Many thanks for joining us. We've been speaking to Advocate Nelson Harvey on the party nominations as well as IEBC's role in whether they do conduct the party nominations or not. And many thanks for watching Weekend Express. We'll take a short break now. We'll be back shortly with more international news.